I tell my son, well, I used to tell him this. He's a little older now, but I'd always tell him that, the brain is like any other organism, that if you don't use it, it will atrophy. And as you get older, I mean, it becomes a little easier to get lazy with that kind of thing. I mean, you get hooked on your job and your daily rut, and you don't challenge your brain to continue to improve. And that's why people, over the course of time, their brain power starts to diminish because you don't exercise it. And one of the reasons I play, well, anything really, whether I was back from poker, whether it was backgammon or DFS or survivor pool stuff, is it continues to challenge me to keep my brain working. I'm not big time crossword puzzle guy. I know a lot of people that do that. There's a lot of things that people can do to continue to make their brain operate. And for me, it's these types of little gambling games that challenge me to kind of figure this kind of stuff out. Trust me, I don't want to say it the wrong way, but I don't spend the amount of time I do on these survivor pool things for this, the $10,000 prize. You know what I mean? That or whatever I'd be getting in some of these things. It's to continue to learn how to process this information and to continue to get your math stuff going. And that part of your brain, it can be sort of lazy, especially with AI and and things like that. So. I want to go over some survivor math, and in doing so, I want to just talk about this puzzle that I've been kind of talking about for weeks now. And it's a pool that has morphed from a regular season pool into a regular season slash playoff pool. And we're down to the end now with 8 people left. And the decision we have to make here is very, very math heavy. And I went through this, and it's very important that you be able to perform this exercise. Now look, you could probably put this into a code or AI or whatever, and it could probably figure it out for you. But again, that's no fun, with this type of thing. So I want to walk you through how to make this decision on how to, finish off this particular tournament, because it's going to help you, number one, in other survivor tournaments when you get deep, and in other parts of your life, to continue to learn how to solve these little puzzles. And it's a combination of math and game theory and prisoner's dilemma and all kinds of stuff going on with this particular contest. So for those watching this for the first time, I mean, it's the Splash Road to the Big Game Survivor. It's 50,000 for first, right? And we're now at the end where we have to pick one team in the conference championship and then one team in the Super Bowl. Um, so one way we can do this is if you could just literally pause this video now and take a look at the grid and try to figure out who I'm supposed to pick and by how much. All right, now let me tell you, if you can do that without going through this video, I mean, I would probably hire you. This is very, very difficult. But then again, most of you have been doing this for a long time. I mean, doing this to exercise is pretty, I don't say it's second nature. It still requires a lot of grinding, but, you get familiar with this type of process. But I encourage you to try. Like, take a look at this grid. And remember, these are the rules. It's 50,000 for first. You got to pick one team in the conference championship and then one team in the Super Bowl. If you survive but you have no legal pick, then you're still technically in until someone else makes a winning pick in the Super Bowl. So if you can just have one pick left and survive in the conference championship, you're not dead if you have no picks in the Super Bowl, as long as no one else actually wins the Super Bowl. And that becomes pretty important. Um, so I guess you should pause the video and write down. I would say write down these numbers. Just write down these picks and tell me who you think you should pick. Now, it would require you to do some external research. I will tell you that right now. So that this is going to be your clean attempt. If you tell me right now you stopped the video, did your outside research, and came up with the exact number of who I should pick and why, then you mean much respect. Okay. Um, but the way I want to do this is at first I want to go through everybody's picks here, who they have to take. and then we'll give some assumptions as far as odds go, and then you could stop the video again. So this was the first chance you had to just stop and do it cold. Now we're going to go on to the next thing first with who everybody has to pick. All right, so first of all, you'll see that I have right now the Rams and Denver available, right? So I can make one pick, either the Rams, excuse me, Seattle or Denver available. So I either have to pick Seattle and then save Denver for the Super Bowl, or pick Denver and save Seattle for the Super Bowl. Very, very simple. Simple decision, simple choice, but how do we make it? Let's look at some of these others. Final Boss. He's in the exact same position as I am. He has both Seattle and Denver available. Johnny, he dead? No, he is not dead, but the only team he has available to pick are the Rams. He's already used Seattle, he's already used New England, and he's always used Denver. So he can only pick the Rams, and after that, he's dead. So he cannot complete the puzzle. I mean, he's got to play the Rams and then hope everything else busts. Okay. But of face, he is another one that's in my position. He's got both the Seahawks and the Denver available. He's got to pick between those two. Those two. Pick me a winner. Likewise, same position as I am. He could pick both Seattle and he could pick Denver. He's got to choose one of those two. GZAT, he has already used Seattle and the Rams and New England. So he has to pick Denver. No choice. And then he's dead. I would say he's dead. Then he has no more picks that he can make. So he's got to hope that Denver wins and the rest of the pool collapses. Midget, he has no legal picks available, right? He's played Seattle and Rams and Denver and New England. He's gone. The only way he can even chop for anything if somehow everybody kind of colludes to pick the same team, which is that I don't even think that's possible this week, and they all lose. So Midget is out. And then you have Casper, and he's another guy that just has the Rams available. He's played Seattle, he's played both New England and Denver. So he is like Johnny. The two of these guys can only play the Rams, and they cannot make any subsequent picks. So they have to hope the Rams win and the rest of the field collapses. So before we get into like some more assumptions, why don't you pause the video and think for a second, who's got the most equity here? Like, who has the most equity? Now, it's going to depend on who everybody picks, but who do you think has the most equity? You think it's GZAT, who's got Denver by himself, but no other picks? Johnny and Casper, who have Rams available, but no other picks? Or is it Final Boss, Butterface, Pick Me a Winner, and me, who we are the only people that can actually make it through the Super Bowl, but we're all duping each other. Well, we all have the possibility of duping each other. So who has the most equity? So that's another place you can pause the video and try to figure it out. Okay. All right. So now we're gonna include some more information. Okay, and that is going to be everybody's chances of winning each game. So you have, and I pulled these from the implied odds from the. We'll just cheat here. The implied odds from the sports books, and I will tell you this: that the Patriots this week are 68.75% to win over the Broncos, who are correspondingly 31.25%. Seattle is 58.76% compared to the Rams 41%. Those are the odds of winning this week. The other assumptions that you can make are what each team's odds are against subsequent opponents in the possible Super Bowl. So those are derivable from the futures market as well, and some look-ahead lines. And I will even give you that information. You would have had to research it to find it, but shouldn't have taken you more than a minute and a half. So if Rams play Denver, for example, the Rams will be 85.1% to win compared to the Rams Denver 14.9. You have Seattle 80.6, Denver 19.4 in that game. Rams 68.3, New England 31.7. Seattle 60.3 against New England's 39.7 if you get that matchup. So with all of this information, this is enough for you to come up with the answer to who I play and probably by how much. Okay. So you can pause the video again and see if you can't come up with it. All right, now we're going to go through a couple of interesting things. Okay. So one thing that I noticed is that we four people, Sheets, Final Boss, Butterface, and Pick Me a Winner, we are the only ones that have Seattle available. Okay? Because the other four people, even one of them's dead, but haven't used them. So if we play Seattle and they win, okay, what ends up happening? Because the Rams have, because Casper's got the Rams, he has to play the Rams, right? So if we take Seattle and beat him, he's dead. You have Johnny, has to play the Rams. So if we knock him out, he's dead. Okay. The only guy that could even be remaining if the Rams, if we take Seattle and they win, is this GZAT. Because he still has Denver available. So he doesn't have to play the Rams. He can't play the Rams. So if GZAT wins with Denver, okay, then at the very worst we chop, okay? Because what did we say? GZAT can't win, can't make it all the way through the Super Bowl. So if we play Seattle and GZAT gets through with Denver, then he's got to survive our pick in the Super Bowl, where we're going to end up having to play Denver in the Super Bowl. And if we win, then we chop 4 ways. But if we lose, then we'll chop 5 ways with GZAT. So right off the bat, a very, very interesting and clean decision to make. In that if I played Seattle and they all win, and if all 4 of us played Seattle and we won, and just Seattle won, we're guaranteed a chop of some kind. Okay, whether it be either five ways or 4 ways, depending on what happens with Denver. Okay, very, very clean, very, very easy. Okay, Seattle 658-point favorite, 58.7% favorite, and you know, and you have that. However, what if we decided to play Seattle and someone else decides to play Denver from our group? Okay, and what if that someone was me? Right? So let's say, and here's another great option we could consider, is what if we played Denver and let's say the other guys played Seattle and we're the only person that has the Denver-Seattle path at our disposal, okay? Then it's a lot more risky, right? Because now we have to win with Denver and with Seattle in the Super Bowl. However, if we're the only person to take Denver, we probably make rate to win more, right? Because if we could be on an island and chop down the whole 50,000 that way. So it's a very interesting decision of whether we should be playing Seattle, which is certainly the more conservative play that rates to cash more often, or should we play Denver? Now, the first thing to realize, though, is that we don't know who everybody else is playing. Okay? So, like, let's just say this is one of those cases where I said, okay, I know all 3 of you dudes that have Seattle along with me. Maybe we should all just play Seattle. Because if we all play Seattle, no one's going to F each other. No one's going to try to, like, take Denver and try to scoop on us, you know? So we should all just take Seattle and guarantee, listen, as long as we get the Seattle win, at least a 5-way chop, maybe a 4-way chop. But we don't know that. You know, what if 3 of us decide to take Seattle and the 4th person decides to take Denver? First of all, is that even a good play? And if it is a good play, maybe we should be making it. So it's a very interesting situation. So what we have to do is we have to calculate the equities of all of these variations, okay? And we have to figure out what everybody stands to win in all situations. So what I did was I created this spreadsheet here, and what we have are the different chances of everything happening, okay, and what the corresponding payouts are, and we're gonna examine different combinations of picks. So first thing that we have to figure out are what the odds are of all things happening are. So if we're deciding to take maybe Seattle, we have to figure out like what all these combinations rate. What are the percent chance of all these combinations happening? So what are the chances that Seattle wins game one and Denver, right, in the conference championship, and then Seattle wins in the Super Bowl? So what we do is we multiply Seattle week one or Seattle in the championship game by Denver by Seattle over Denver, which is right over here. Okay. Uh, by Seattle over Denver, and that becomes 14.8%. Now, how much do we make if that happens? Well, if all four of us took Seattle, we would have in that situation a four-way chop, because if we go Seattle, Denver, Seattle, then the one person that was forced to take Denver, he's busted in the Super Bowl, so we chop it four ways. On the other hand, if all four of us take Seattle and it goes Seattle, Denver, then Denver wins the Super Bowl, well, first of all, what are the chances of that happening? That's only 3%. Seattle this week times Denver this week times Denver in the Super Bowl, who would only be 19%, only be at that point 19%. So 3% of the time that combination happens. And in that combination, we have to chip five ways, because then we're chopping with the guy who played Denver because we didn't wipe him out in the Super Bowl. So here you're multiplying, what the chance of something happening is by the payout, and you have this resulting equity. So Seattle, Denver, Denver, 3% times 10 is $356. And then you have the variation of Seattle and New England winning. So if Seattle and New England win, what happens? Well, the four of us win with Seattle, and then we lose. Then we have no legal pick in the Super Bowl, but it doesn't matter because the Denver guy will have lost. So we will be the only four remaining who've survived, and we will chop four ways. And that happens 40% of the time. Seattle wins, followed by New England winning. So that 12.5 times 40% is 5,000. So the resulting equity, if we played Seattle, is $7,256. So if we think that all the other guys in our crew here in this conglomerate are going to play Seattle, then it's $7,256 in equity to play them. Okay, now what is the equity if instead of doing that we played Denver? Like if we kind of implied to these other dudes, hey, let's all just collude and take Seattle, but then I said, F you, I'm just going to take Denver. Or we don't actually have this conversation. I decide to go Denver on my own. And let's say we get the result we want, where I am the person who takes Denver, everybody else takes Seattle. Now, again, it's a lot riskier, right? Because you need a couple of things to happen. Not only do I need Denver to win as an underdog this week, but I'm going to need Seattle then to win in the Super Bowl. So the odds of it happening are much lower, but let's take a look at the equity. So again, same thing. If I took Denver, well, what we'd have to do is if one person takes Denver, we have to figure out what our odds would be, what our equity would be, and what Seattle's equity would be. Let's take a look at what happens. So if it comes in Seattle, Denver, Seattle, okay? If I'm the only one that takes Denver, well, now it's 14.8% times the full 50,000, right? Because if I'm the only one that took Denver this week and then saved Seattle, and I got this run out, which happens 14.8% of the time, I scooped the whole thing. So 14.8% of the time times 50,000, I get 7,400. Now, so that's 7,400 resulting equity. So now you have Seattle. What if Seattle, Denver, Denver happens? Well, that's no good, because I will have taken because then I would have been out in the Super Bowl, right? So I'd be dead. And Seattle, New England, obviously I'm dead because I will have taken Denver. But that's not the end of my equity if I take Denver, because there's also this weird variation of what happens when the Rams and Denver win together. And that happens 12.8% of the time. So when Rams times Denver happens, well, what happens is I lose, okay, excuse me, but I win, excuse me, and I have no Super Bowl pick, but nobody else does, right? So if I play Denver and nobody else has a Super Bowl pick, the Seattle guys with Super Bowl picks got wiped out. Now I'm chopping with these two Rams guys who were forced to take the Rams but were dead after that, and the one Denver guy who was forced to take Denver. So and dead after that. So if Rams Denver comes in, my Denver pick stood on its own. And that chops four ways. So 12.8% of the time that happens. So when you add up these equities, my equity of taking Denver is $9,011 compared to $7,256 on Seattle. Okay. Now, on the other hand, okay, we're going to get to something in a second. If one person did take Denver, whether it be me or somebody else, what does that do to Seattle, those Seattle people's equity? Well, we'll go through it. If the one person takes Denver, again, if it comes in Seattle, Denver, Seattle, then the Seattle, Denver, Seattle guys win. And it's 14.8% of the time, four-way chop, $1,850. And then if Seattle, Denver, Denver comes in, they lose because they didn't get through. And then if Seattle, New England comes in, interesting scenario. Now the person who took Denver is out. The other person who took Denver is out. And no one else has a legal pick. So the three remaining Seattle guys make it to the Super Bowl without needing to do anything. So they chop the 50,000 three ways at $1,667. And that happens 40% of the time. So the resulting Seattle equity, if you took Seattle, if you're one of the three that takes to Seattle when someone else takes Denver, then their equity goes up as well. Okay. So the four people that took Seattle, that were thinking of taking Seattle, they would all do better. Okay. If they made sure that one of them took Denver. Okay. But the question is, like, it's a fight for this equity, right? So the jump in equity from everybody taking Seattle to Denver is higher than the resulting equity in the Seattle people if they do that. So what you have to think about is if you're going to try to be the one to take Denver, I mean, you better be right about being the only person to do that, because what happens otherwise is really nasty. And let's get into that. Let's just say that two people take Denver. So I get this bright idea that I want to be the sole person to get all this equity, and someone else decides to do that too. Well, now we are effed, because look what happens. If two people take Denver, now if it comes in, let's look at the Denver equity first. If it comes in Seattle, Denver, Seattle, which was the big nut, whatever nut result, you no longer get the whole 50. Now you only get 25,000. So now your equity is only 3,700. Okay. And now you no longer get that Rams Denver equity. Okay. Because there's somebody else that has this Denver, that is Denver in the offing. Okay. So very, very nasty results if you are not the only person to take Denver. Sorry about that, but the one variation again that I forgot to mention was that if two people do take Denver, you have this Rams Denver variation where you now have the two people that took the Rams advance with no legal pick in the Super Bowl, and now you have three people advancing with Denver who also have no pick in the Super Bowl. So we have all five of us would end up chopping. So if two people playing Denver, then here you have another 1288, but your equity is now only 4988. So your equity, when even one other person besides you takes Denver, your equity just crashes. Okay. And on the other hand, Seattle's equity, if another person takes Denver, not if one, but if two people take Denver, it goes through the freaking roof, as you can see, you know. And this should be sort of instinctive, but if you want to walk through the numbers here, Seattle, Denver, Seattle, same thing. You have 14% of the time is a four-way chop. But then here's the real nasty one. Now you have this Seattle New England variation where now these two Denvers are knocked out, and now you're only chopping this with two people, with one other person. So now it's 40% of the time you're chopping for 25,000 here. So this equity now sums up to 11.9. So with each new person that takes Denver, the more your Seattle equity goes up. So what you have here is a very, very interesting decision. Okay. And the reality is this, that who you take, who I take, depends obviously explicitly on whether I think there's going to be one other person playing Denver. Okay. If I believe that there is only one other that there is nobody else playing Denver, then what you get is a big ass bump from playing Denver because you're going from 7,200 all the way up to 9,000. So you're gaining 1,800 or so, 1,760, whatever that is. However, if you're wrong and one other person does take Denver, now you're going from 7,200 if you stick with Seattle. Actually, it's worse because if you stuck with Seattle when one person took Denver, when one other person took Denver, you would have ended up with Seattle equity of 8,500. And instead, since you took Denver instead, you're down at 4,900. So you're going to lose $4,000 if you're wrong. Okay. So basically, $1,600 gain if you're right about being the only person, as opposed to 4,000 if you're wrong. So basically, one way of saying that is that you have to be about 75% sure or so, I mean 70% sure. And again, I'm not going to calculate this explicitly, but it shouldn't be difficult. You should be X% sure to balance those different wins and losses out of equity that you're going to be the only person. So who do I pick? I don't know. But that's the determining factor is how confident I am if I go and take Denver that I'm going to be the only one. I'm inclined to think that someone else is going to do it. And partially for the reasons I mentioned, but partially maybe by accident. I think it's possible that people just might play Denver because they know that Seattle's going to be an enormous favorite in the Super Bowl, and they want to get all the way to the end. But yet, on the other hand, Seattle is actually a favorite here, and people have to see what I saw, right? That if Seattle wins, the pool's pretty much over. I mean, unless someone else takes Denver. So I don't know. But this is the math you have to do. And these are the puzzles that you have to solve. So what do I think? I'm really not sure. Maybe it'll be a portfolio management decision. Because I have other entries that rely on different combinations for the Super Bowl, not in this pool, but in other pools. And maybe if I play Denver in this pool and root for Seattle, maybe in a different pool where I have Seattle and Denver available, I'll play Seattle and root for Denver. That makes sense. But again, it's more the exercise than anything else. And that's going to do it.